Good morning, dear ones. It has been another week, a week of wildfires and hurricanes and pandemic, and a week that included the death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I heard that news on Friday evening, and I was folding my children's laundry, most of which was hand-me-downs for my youngest child, a 2-year-old daughter, from another church family, that we will wear these clothes for a while and then pass them along to another church family. And I was thinking of these 3 small girls and how the world feels a little less safe for them now, that they might not have as much control over their bodies, as much protection in the workplace and school and all the places they will go. And then I wept for the reality that it was one 87-year-old woman who was keeping them safer. The next morning, I spoke with my older child, who you will see a little later in the service, about why I was feeling sad, about how Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg had died. And she's someone that my kids know from this, I'll show you, from this little book that I commend to all of you if you have small people in your life, called Baby Feminists. Because before Ruth Bader Ginsburg was on the Supreme Court, she was a baby. It's charming, and there's a whole list of folks who would make the world safer. But DeForest said, "It's okay, Mama, because we still have Malala," meaning Malala Yousafzai, the youngest Nobel Peace Prize laureate in history who works to make sure that girls have access to school. And so we still have Malala, and that is true, but we also still have all of us. So in the Jewish tradition, the thing that you say when someone dies is, "May her memory be for a blessing." And that is in part just to name that it's a blessing to have known someone, but it is also an encouragement to take up the work of the person who has died, to live into their passions and their commitments and carry that work forward. And so that is the invitation that I have felt and that I encourage you all to feel in this moment, in all of our various ways, to continue the work of love and justice, so her memory may be for a blessing. So come, let us gather. Come, let us be together in the ways we can be together now safely on this moment when the daylight and the darkness are in balance, and worship and remember and celebrate. So come, let us gather. Come, let us worship. It is good to be together today.
Come, come, whoever you are welcome here. No matter your age, your size, the color of your eyes, your hair, your skin, you are welcome here. No matter how you joined us, if you joined alone or with others, you are welcome here. No matter whom you love or how you speak or whatever your abilities, you are welcome here. Whether you come with laughter in your heart or tears in your eyes, you are welcome here. If you come here with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands, then you indeed are welcome here. Those were adapted words by Melanie Morrill Ensminger, and I'm Bob Davis, a member of the Sunday Services Committee. People's Church is a member congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Association with a 165-year history in Kalamazoo of liberal religious thought. May this service provide you with hope, peace, joy, and love. On this Sunday nearest the fall equinox, I'm reminded of my personal habit this time of year of reflecting on the previous summer. As I get older, I get more morbid thoughts and realize I have a finite number of summers left to enjoy. And did I spend my time wisely, enjoyably, productively? Do I feel rejuvenated? Did my actions reflect my values? The COVID pandemic certainly impacted my family, eliminating planned trips, restaurant visits, musical festivals. But all was not lost as I developed new routines of walking my neighborhood daily, resulting in increased energy, new acquaintances, and new awareness of the birds and flowers around me. I'm grateful that internet technology allowed me to visit with friends and family in Kalamazoo and across the country, and to order delivery of just about anything I wanted. A simple mask, hand hygiene, social distancing, and the consideration of most community members has allowed me to feel safe from COVID when I venture out of the house or need to invite a person into my house for maintenance. I'm blessed in many ways. And I'm also saddened by the continuing episodes of gun violence in Kalamazoo, the deep community divisions, the personal struggles of many, the irresponsible social behavior of a few, and now the death of Justice Ginsburg. I look to this church community to help guide us through these difficult times. Come join us in worship and deep reflection on this Sunday morning. And now let us join Savannah in singing our introit.
Good morning. When we sing together, I recommend that you find a comfortable position for singing and breathing. This is our first song, Meditation on Breathing.
Each week at People's Church, we light a chalice during our service and take time to reflect upon its meaning. Please enter in the chat box where you are lighting your chalice as I light mine in Portage on Sunburst Drive. Words by Ben Sewell. Hold fast to summer. Enjoy the heightened appreciation these still warm September days. Create more memories. Take more pictures. Enjoy a bit of denial. Suck all the summer sweetness out of your sun-warmed garden tomatoes. Smile at somebody. Squeeze a hand. Put up some jam or pickles. We store these things up as we approach the uncertain seasons, and our summer companions will be our winter support and sustenance. In celebration of the changing seasons, we gather together in community.
This church is a generous community, and there are very many ways that you all are generous. I'm going to tell one story. So a couple of weeks ago, I was at the church building, which is rare, and I got a text message from my husband. He had been going around our community looking for a chair that is the right size for a kindergartner. They are all sold out because everybody is setting up little desks for their children at home. And then I thought, there's a kindergarten classroom for Sunday school right next to me. And so I went over, and sure enough, there were plenty of chairs. And that day happened to be the only day for about 6 months that Diane and I were both in the church office. So I could put on my mask and walk down the hallway and say, Diane, can I take a chair home so my kid can sit comfortably as he does Zoom school and computer games? And she said, of course. And then she said, we have a lot of chairs and desks here, and I bet there's some other families who need them. And so she put a note out to our parents, and about 5 families now have furniture from the church that they're using to help their children. And that makes a big difference for those families. And we have all of these things at the church that we're not using, that we're trying to send out. So we gave out hymnals, and we're giving out all of the things. And if you have ideas for how we can use these materials, or if you know someone or are someone who needs a tiny chair to make this time a little more bearable, let us know. That sort of generosity makes a tremendous difference. So thank you for being generous. And this is the time where I ask you to continue to be the generous people that you are, supporting the good and important work of this community. So there's a link now in the chat box to give, or please keep giving in all of the ways you do.
Please join me in saying our words of thanks. From the countless gifts we each have been given, gifts of life and love and sustenance, we bring these small portions to share in the works of love which none of us can accomplish alone. Thank you.
I invite you to join with me for a time of meditation and breathing together. Let us start with the opening words by Thich Nhat Hanh. Breathing in, I know I am breathing in, and breathing out, I know that I am breathing out. Breathing in, my breath grows deep, and breathing out, my breath grows slow. Breathing in, I dwell in the present moment, and breathing out, I know that this is a wonderful moment. As we breathe mindfully together, I invite us to reflect on the breath. At this time when the wildfires are burning up and down the West Coast, and the smoke plumes are traveling across the ocean, as we take a deep breath of clear air in together here and now, may we notice that with mindfulness and with gratitude. As our fellow humans are crying out, "I can't breathe," while knees are literally and figuratively upon their necks, may we join together in working for justice and equality for all people. As we breathe together today, 6 months into the COVID pandemic, we are breathing air, hoping to breathe clean air without the virus. We notice that we are unable to worship together in person, and we acknowledge all the losses and the sacrifices that we've made over this time. We take a moment to honor all those who have contracted COVID-19, both those who are recovering as well as those who have passed away, and acknowledge their loved ones and the pain and the loss that they've endured. As we breathe together, may our lungs be clear and healthy. As we approach the autumn equinox, we acknowledge that time in the turning of the year when there is balance between day and night, between dark and night, between dark and light. As we acknowledge the turning of the seasons, we invoke some of that balance into our own lives that is present in nature. As we breathe together, may we invite balance in all areas of our lives at this time. And as we inhale, let us inhale loving kindness and compassion and have it fill our hearts and our bodies. And as we exhale, let us send that loving kindness and that compassion out to all those who could use some. Let us take a few moments to breathe together in silence, breathing in loving kindness and compassion, and sending it out to all beings on this earth.
Before our first reading, Requiescat in Pesto by Philip Barton, let me make a couple of comments for non-Latin speakers like myself. Requiescat in pace is Latin for rest in peace or RIP, commonly used on gravestones. And pesto is a wonderful Italian paste created magically by simply grinding together fragrant, fresh basil leaves with olive oil and maybe pine nuts. Needed: a ritual for clipping the last basil for the last batch of pesto, for inhaling that final blast of slower days as the blender grinds like last rites for the summer. Here, in the middle of September, something to comfort us amid this rigid schedule and the last ripe tomato lingering on the windowsill. Something to remind us all this homework will come to an end. Equinox by Barbara Crooker. Another October. The maples have done their slick trick of turning yellow almost overnight. Summer's hazy skies are cobalt blue. My friend has come in from the west, where it's been a year of no mercy. Chemotherapy, bone marrow transplant, more chemotherapy, and her hair came out in fistfuls twice, bald as a pumpkin, and then the surgeon's knife. But she's come through it all, annealed by fire, calm settling in her bones like the morning mist in valleys and low places, and her hair is returned, glossy as a horse chestnut kept in a shirt pocket. Today, a red fox ran down through the corn stubble. He vanished like smoke. I want to praise things that cannot last. The scarlet and orange leaves are already gone, blown down by a cold rain, crushed and trampled. They rise again in leaf meal and wood smoke. The great blue heron's return to the pond settles in the reeds like a steady flame. Geese cut a wedge out of the sky, drag the gray days behind them like a skein of old wool. I want to praise everything brief and finite. Overhead, the Pleiades fall into place. Orion rises. Great horned owls muffle the night with their calls. Night falls swiftly, tucking us in her black velvet robe, the stitches showing through all those little lights, our little lives, rising and falling.
Our next reading is from a book of poetry by Sean Parker Dennison, who serves the Unitarian Universalist congregation in Ashland, Oregon, a community that's been devastated by fires recently. He writes, "Less here now. Less light today than yesterday, less sun for growing things, less time for demanding, doing, less gleam and shine and sheen and dazzle. I did not know how much I needed this diminishment. Here is the last green-pink tomato turning. Here is the rough undercoat thickening. Here is the urge to dig in for hibernation. Here is the slow return to the fire. I did not know the importance of this respite, this repose. Now the smell of decay and transformation, now the fruiting and the harvest, now the letting go, the fiery spin into the wind, now the sigh of completion. I did not know death could be so beautiful. I did not understand the relief of letting go.
When we went homeward to our land, like dreamers we shall be, like leaping rivers in the spring, we'll joyful be and free. For though our sowing work is hard and tears do freely flow, on harvest day we'll shoulder sheaves, our hearts will overflow.
One of the tiny pleasures of worshiping in this way is that we do not have to pick hymns that you all already know. Because we know how painful it is to kind of stumble through something that we don't know yet, which we still do sometimes. But today, Savannah and Jennifer and I could pick the really good fall hymns that we like, and it doesn't matter that it would sound kind of a mess if we were all singing them together. So perhaps we'll learn a new song, or at least get to enjoy a new song as we worship in this way. Late last year, I discovered a tiny slip of paper in my mailbox at the church. It contained the Philip Martin poem that Bob just read, the poem about pesto. There was no name attached, but there was a note, few words that said, "Idea for a service," with a question mark after it. I usually dislike anonymous communications. It's hard to know what to make of feedback, especially criticism, when there's no possibility for follow-up communication and deeper understanding. But anonymous poems I will gladly accept. So I added the poem to my files and thought that maybe someday it would appear in a service. It came to mind again a few months ago when I spent most of a day clipping basil leaves, chopping garlic, toasting pine nuts, and blending it together with oil to make pesto. Most of what I made now sits in my freezer beside a 10-pound box of frozen blueberries and a few freezer bags full of pitted tart Michigan cherries. I store up these bits of summer every year. Perhaps you do too. I've seen pictures and heard stories from some of you about the gallons of tomato sauce you've made, or your prolific jam making and pickling endeavors, or the massive amounts of zucchini you've harvested. And I know that this storing up is not something everyone does. Time, cost, interest, and ability might keep some of us from that work. This year, my pesto making and cherry pitting took on a new urgency as I preserved the summer taste to last for the winter. I knew this year in a different way that I would need these small comforts in the cold months ahead. I know that I don't know what this winter will bring. But by making pesto and pitting cherries, I could make sure that my family could have a summer dinner, is what we call it, of pesto pasta and cherry cobbler in January, which would bring us a little joy. It will not be enough, given all the small and large losses of these days, but it will be something. So many of us are coming into new understandings of how limited our power is, how little we get to shape outcomes, and our power still exists. There is so There's little that I can control about the seasons ahead. But I can make sure that there will be moments of joy and pleasure. I invite you to find ways to make sure that there is joy ahead of you. Joy that isn't dependent on circumstances beyond your control, like the timeline of vaccine development and distribution, or the outcome of an election. Of course, we need to work to shape those outcomes too. And I urge you to prepare some small, certain pleasures for yourself. Back to the poem. Martin opens by asking for a ritual for clipping the final leaves, a ritual for comfort in the middle of September, something to remind us that all this homework will come to an end. There's a certain obliviousness in his call for a ritual, because there are lots of rituals for this moment, the middle of September, the moment when the daylight and the night are equal in length, when it is harvest time. So many cultures have holidays right now to mark the specialness of this moment. There's the Mid-Autumn Festival of China and the Chinese diasporas. Ancient Maya celebrations of the equinox included the construction of a temple to the serpent god Quetzalcoatl at Chichen Itza, in such a way that for 45 minutes on each equinox, a shadow is cast down the side of the temple that resembles the serpent god descending to earth. And the shadow happens on no other day. There is Mehregen, a festival celebrating harvest, friendship, and love, with roots in Zoroastrianism that is now celebrated by people of many faiths in Iran and points east. Germany's Oktoberfest was originally a harvest festival, and the Jewish holiday Sukkot is in part a harvest feast. I don't want to browbeat the poet, but I want to lift up that sometimes the thing we crave exists if we look for it. And a final festival to offer to the poet and all of you is Mabon. Mabon is one of the names for the fall equinox in pagan traditions that mark the wheel of the year. The wheel of the year is a cycle of holidays throughout the year that mark the solstices, the days of greatest dark and greatest light, the equinoxes, the days of equal light and dark, and then the points in between the solstices and the equinoxes. So there's 8 holidays throughout the year, one every 6 weeks or so. Mabon is the holiday that falls right now at the time of the autumnal equinox. It is the second of 3 harvest festivals, and it focuses on the fruit harvest. It is a time of thanksgiving for the bounty of the earth, a time to commit to share that bounty so one will continue to be blessed and survive the harder winter months ahead. A pagan writer describes Mabon as a time of celebration and also a time of rest after the labor of harvest. It is a moment of reaping what you have sown, time to look at the hopes and aspirations of Imbolc and Astara, the late winter and spring equinox holidays, and reflect on how they have manifested. It is a time to complete projects, to clear out and let go that which is no longer wanted or needed as we prepare for descent, so the winter can offer a time for reflection and peace. And it is time to plant seeds of new ideas and hopes, which will lie dormant but nourished in the dark until the return of spring. For the poet, or for any of the rest of us in search of a ritual now, Mabon offers us ways to celebrate this season. You might want to have a special feast to celebrate this moment with seasonal fruits and vegetables like squash and apples. A modern Mabon ritual is planting bulbs, placing them in the dark earth to quietly grow and explode with color in the spring. You can celebrate by being generous, especially with food. This might be a time for deliveries of cookies to people you care about, or donations to the worthy organizations that keep people fed in our community, like Ministry with Community and Loaves and Fishes. It's also common to make an altar at this time, to gather up your harvest, whatever that may be, light a few candles, feel gratitude, and say a prayer. I want to tell you about the adaptation of that practice that my family and I will be celebrating in the next few days. We'll be gathering up our special summer objects, which in our case include the inflatable pool that's been in our yard, swimsuits, sandals, bubbles, perhaps some gardening tools. We'll be saying thank you to them for the joy they brought us this summer. We will praise everything brief and finite, praise these things that cannot last, and then pack most of them away until next year. This time when light and dark are in balance is also a season to think about balance in our own lives. I know not everyone has the capacity for that in this moment, of course. Those of us working essential jobs, or parenting young children, or living through grief, or living with fear, or all four combined, might not have the energy to do anything but get through the day. But if you do have the time, I invite you to reflect on your life right now. What is in balance? What is out of balance? What do you have power over that might bring more balance to your life? How might you follow the instructions of Sean Parker Dennison, who encourages us to look to the natural world for lessons on respite, repose, diminishment, and letting go right now? How might the lessening of the light bring lessening of tension, stress, pain, anxiety to you right now? The writer I quoted earlier says that Mabon is a time to plant seeds of new ideas and hopes which will lie dormant but nourished in the dark until the return of spring. This is a hard season for hope. It is such an uncertain time. I've heard this from you in so many ways and said it myself. There's this series of at leasts that have kept us going this spring and summer. At least when the stay-at-home time started, the days were getting longer. At least we've had lakes to visit all summer when we can't go indoors anywhere. At least it's pretty safe to socialize in small groups outside. At least. And as it gets colder and darker, we will lose so many of these at leasts that have helped us the last few months. For some of us, it will be harder when it's colder outside and the days are short. I have found some wisdom for this hard season and what it might mean to hope now from Admiral James Stockdale. He described a truth that came to be called the Stockdale paradox. Stockdale was the highest ranking American military officer kept as a prisoner of war during the Vietnam War. He was in captivity for over 7 years, 4 of them in solitary confinement. He lived through torture, and during that time, he was not in control of any aspect of his life. Years after that time, an interviewer noted that he had made it through those unbearable years with a relatively strong mental health. The interviewer asked Stockdale about the people who didn't survive the circumstances as well as he did. And Stockdale responded, "I can tell you who didn't make it out. It was the optimists. Yes, they were the ones who always said, 'We're going to be out by Christmas.' Christmas would come and it would go. Then they'd say, 'We're going to be out by Easter.' and Easter would come, and Easter would go, and then Thanksgiving, and then it would be Christmas again. And they died of a broken heart. This is what I learned from those years in the prison camp, where all those constraints were just oppressive. You must never, ever confuse, on the one hand, the need for absolute, unwavering faith that you can prevail despite those constraints, with, on the other hand, the need for the discipline to begin by confronting the brutal facts, whatever they are. We're not getting out of here by Christmas, he concludes. So, dear ones, as we endure what for many of us is likely to be one of the defining seasons of our lives, I invite you to embrace this Stockdale paradox. So we must have faith that we will get out of this and face the reality that tells us it will not be for a while. We cannot hold our hope to deadlines because it will continually break our hearts. And paradoxically, we desperately need hope. So what does this look like? First, face reality. I encourage you, if you haven't already, to begin imagining what your Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year, and any other fall and winter celebrations and traditions will look like now. Not because I have some secret knowledge that these things will be as exactly unsafe then as they are now, but because I don't want you to be surprised and heartbroken like those optimists Stockdale knew. Next, find some hope that does not depend on a timeline. So I encourage you, if you haven't already, to begin imagining something at the end of this pandemic time that will bring you joy and allow you to connect to a part of yourself that might be going dormant now. Some good thing that is mostly in your control and has no timeline attached. I know someone who's an entertainer or a beautiful hostess who yearns for her first post-pandemic dinner party and has been imagining the menu and guest list and testing out recipes. I know another person who loves to travel, who is in the process of planning 4 different trips, one for each season. And once it is safe enough to travel, he will take whatever trip correlates with that season. The work of researching hotels and museums and restaurants and shops in a place he has never been gives him faith and strength in these hard days. And he has set it up in such a way that there is no timeline for heartbreak. One of the ways that I'm practicing this sort of hope is by planning our first service back together in our building, whenever that is. So find the when this is over joy for you and give it some care and thought. Not so much that you ignore the current reality, but enough to remind you that this won't be forever, that there is something to look forward to on the other side. These days are hard, and the longer nights and colder weather ahead might make it harder for some of us. If you're able, slow down as the natural world slows around us. Seek balance in this season of balanced daylight and darkness. Find ways to celebrate and honor this moment when summer shifts to fall. Mix your hope with realism and your realism with hope as you navigate these days. Use what power you have to store up some joy for the season ahead. May it be so. May we make it so. And amen.
December shall fill windy hollow, the bleak rain trails after, and March wind shall follow. The deer through the valleys leave print of their going, and diamonds of sleet mark the ridges of snowing. The stillness of death shall stoop over the water, the plover sweep low where the pale streamlets falter, but deep in the earth clod the black seed is living, when spring sounds her bugles, arousing and giving.
So dear ones, I wish I could tell you with some certainty what the season ahead will hold. It will be hard. And there are ways that we can cultivate a realistic hope. There are ways that we can make our values real in the world. And even if some of our acorn hopes end up eaten by squirrels, it is worth it. Our efforts still matter, even if they don't come to fruition in quite the way and quite the timeline that we had hoped. So go in peace and go in love.